The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 179. Does a road win come any tougher than it did Saturday in Evanston? Stay tuned. Winning at Kinnick Stadium could be even more difficult this week against an improving and physical Iowa team.
Oh man, Ufer's been broadcasting for 27 years. I have never seen anything like this. They need 2 inches. Dennis Franklin, the quarterback, taking a long count from center. He hands off to Shuttlesworth 5, and it's down to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Dennis Franklin! Oh my God, Dennis Franklin fooled everybody. He fooled me. He fooled the entire Ohio State team. Kneeling is Larry Gustafson. Attempting will be Super Toe. Super Toe will kick the 30-yard field goal. It's kicked to send over there. It's a tied-up ball game. 10-10. Okay. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Carter hands up. Carter's got it. Oh my God! Carter scores! Look at those Wolverines. 95 Wolverines going to the end zone. Carter got the pass in the air. It's done. Buford is going out of his mind. I have never seen anything like this in all my 40 years of covering Michigan football.
This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. On today's show, we look back on Saturday's thrilling overtime win against Northwestern, and then set our sights on this Saturday's challenge, beating an improving Iowa team at crazy Kinnick Stadium. On our visitor segment today, we'll hear from Iowa radio play-by-play voice Gary Dolphin. Then on Michigan Gameday, beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive will share his thoughts on Northwestern and then preview this Saturday's matchup with the Hawkeyes. First, my view from Section 17. A win is a win, and a win on the road is even better. I think like most of you, I tend to dwell too much on what we didn't do on Saturday, but in the end, what we did do is fight and claw our way to a triple overtime win against a desperate Northwestern team. With a young team, you never know if that kind of win helps flip the switch, instill confidence, or just take some pressure off them for at least a week. So along with winning the game, the positives I take away from Saturday are that we might have a running game that can get positive yards with Derek Green and Devion Smith. Despite his flaws and the fact that he is beaten up, Devin Gardner never quits. In fact, this team I don't think has any quit in them. And because I'm a defensive guy, a big positive is that our defense is getting better every week. Do we have some flaws? Yes, we do. But overall, we're getting great effort and better execution, which we expect from a Greg Madison defense as the season progresses. But overall, this D is playing tough, solid football. So on we go to Kinnick Stadium Saturday. I have never seen a Michigan team walk into Kinnick and have an easy day. It is loud, the weather is going to be a factor, and Iowa is flat out a good football team. Not great, but tough and improving on both sides of the ball. Gary Dolphin is the radio play-by-play voice of Iowa football, and he's coming up next on our visitor segment. So stay with us here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. With us on our visitor segment this week, the radio play-by-play voice of the Iowa Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin. Gary, great to have you with us.
Hey, my pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Well, Gary, the Hawkeyes are 6-3 overall, 3-3 in the Big Ten, coming off a bye week, and it looks like things are coming together on both sides of the ball really nicely for the Hawkeyes right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd say they're coming together better on the offensive side of football because really the defense has been extremely solid and consistent most of the year. Now, you hope guys get better week to week, and I think, as you know, that's a trademark of a Kirk Ferentz coach team, is that he may not always have more talent than the opponent, but it seems like his guys get better and really do peak in mid-November. And if you're an Iowa fan, you certainly have to hope that happens Saturday with Michigan coming to Kinnick Stadium. But I think the defense has been pretty solid all year. The offense, they've had some injuries. They've not been able to develop that consistent wide receiver passing game that they had hoped. They're getting better, but a lot of young guys there. The out has been the tight ends. The tight ends have been very productive, and obviously the Iowa running game has been real solid.
Well, Gary, let's talk about a few of the key players on the offensive side of the ball for Iowa. The first one that comes to mind is young Jake Rudick. From what I've seen of Jake, he manages the game very, very well for a young guy. Doesn't try to do too much. Makes good decisions with the football within the offense. You've got to like what you see from this young man.
I would agree with that. I think that's a fair observation. For a young guy who's started 10 football games in his college career, he certainly has done better than I thought he would this year. Yeah, he's got a few interceptions, and most of those are on him. But those were the only bad decisions he's made. I can remember one against Michigan State, one against Wisconsin. On opening day, he threw a pick at midfield against Northern Illinois that resulted in Northern's game-winning field goal. And as we've seen, that's a pretty good football team with Jordan Lynch and that DeKalb group. So he's been getting picked off or intercepted, or his mental lapses have come against outstanding teams, and in particularly terrific defenses like Michigan State and Wisconsin. But he's done a whole lot more good than bad. I thought he engineered a terrific, and what's interesting is he's played better on the road. And I'm not sure where that's coming from, but he played outstanding at Iowa State, at Minnesota, at Purdue a couple weeks ago. He's pretty bulletproof. I mean, he doesn't really show a lot of emotion when he makes a great play, nor does he show a lot of emotion when he makes a bad play. He lives in the moment, and then he moves on. He's got a great ability to flush mistakes, Mike. And as you know, that's important for a quarterback to do that. But he's going to be a pediatric neurologist, so I'm guessing with his mental state, he's in pretty good shape with himself.
Well, he does appear to be very unflappable. There's no doubt about that. It helps when you look behind him in the backfield, Mark Weissman, who's been such a solid running back for the last few years. But recently, Iowa has gone more with Damon Bullock. And then against Purdue a couple of weeks ago, Jordan Canzeri put together a really nice game. It's a nice luxury for a young quarterback and for Coach Ferentz to have three options that can move the chains back there, isn't it?
Yeah, as you know, Iowa's bread and butter is that zone stretch run play, that zone stretch read and cut it up in there. Weissman came in as a fullback after he transferred in from the Air Force Academy, and yet with all the injuries, they had to move him to tailback. Now, he's a downhill runner. He's not going to run away from anybody. But if there are holes inside, he can hit that and pop it and usually carry a couple defenders for 3 or 4 additional yards. With Damon Bullock and Jordan Canzeri, they give Iowa the change of pace. Guys that can break the long run, can run away from defenders, get to the second and third levels. And that was evident against Purdue. Obviously, Michigan presents a much more difficult run game plan than Purdue does, because the Wolverines are very good at stopping the runner, have been pretty consistent in that area. But the key this year is that those guys have stayed relatively healthy. Weissman had a high ankle sprain that plagued him for 5 or 6 games a year ago. Bullock missed all of 5 or 6 games with not 1 but 2 concussions a year ago. Canzeri didn't play a year ago because he had torn his ACL the previous spring in spring ball. And so it's just nice to have a healthy stable of running back. I mean, everybody's beat up this time of year, but the Hawkeyes can come at you a number of different ways out of the backfield.
Well, and another thing, Gary, is the guys that don't get much mention anywhere are up in the trenches. And that Hawkeye offensive line, from what I've seen the last few weeks, they are moving people off the ball, aren't they?
They really are. That's a great observation. And that's something you can't keep quiet if you're an opposing coach. or an opposing defense. You see it on tape, and it starts with Brandon Sheriff, the left tackle. He in my mind is a lock for all Big Ten. Wallen is a tremendous player at Michigan. He's going to be on that first team. Sheriff should be there, right there with him. In fact, Iowa's tackles are really the key to the offensive line. Mike, Brett Van Sloten has been a starter for most of 3 years. He's on the right side. He's been solid. Sheriff is, if he comes back next year, that would be a huge bonus for Iowa. But that position has produced the likes of Brian Bulaga and Riley Reif out of the Detroit Lions camp, and now Sheriff Robert Gallery 10 years ago. That left tackle has been a gold mine for the Hawkeyes, and Sheriff is as good as any of those guys previously mentioned. So he's got a bright future on Sunday afternoon, but he's a junior. He did break a leg a year ago, which set him back a little bit. Hopefully he comes back next year, but if he doesn't, he's going to be making a lot of money. And then the guards, Bofelli and Jordan Walsh, and, of course, the center, Austin Blythe, who moved from guard a year ago, they have really gelled. Their chemistry is outstanding right now.
Another guy in that offense that I want to mention, because he is one player I like to watch, an incredible weapon, is C.J. Fedorowicz. He is all you could want and more in a tight end, isn't he?
He is physically. He tends to take a vacation mentally every now and then. He's had the last couple of games, he's had some really uncharacteristic false start penalties, C.J. has, and he's a very likable guy. And he's a giant. I mean, he's 6'6", 6'7", about 265. They've started to slot him out a little bit more because he can run really well after he catches the ball. His deficiencies have been blocking, but this year he has blocked as well as he has his entire career. And I suppose, he's a senior. He should be a better blocker, because if he's going to play at the next level, NFL teams always look for that blocking ability first. And then can you catch the ball and run with it? But he has really matured this year. He's not had too good. The last two games have not been overly productive for him. But he seems to be a big game player, and that bodes well, I think, for Saturday with Michigan. But to him, and then to the rest of the tight ends, a young man out of the state of Michigan who's really emerged this year is Jake Ducey. He had the great game against Ohio State, 85-yard touchdown. Ray Hamilton, a kid out of Ohio. George Kittle. They've got 4 or 5 guys that can run in there at tight end. And frankly, Mike, until that passing game, which is still trying to find itself, the outside the boundary line guys, until that game comes full circle, you're seeing Iowa run a lot of 3 tight end sets and getting those guys out into space. And I have no doubt you'll see that again on Saturday.
Our guest here in our visitor segment this week is the radio play-by-play voice of the Iowa Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin. Gary, over in the D, it seems the key to this revitalized defense is linebacker James Morris. BTN did a great segment on him a couple of weeks ago. He's a special kind of a kid and a leader, isn't he?
He really is. I think those are two very apt descriptions of James. Tremendous young man, 3.86, 3.87 consistently throughout his academic collegiate career. He's one of 16 National Football Foundation scholarship finalists. He's already been awarded an $18,000 postgraduate scholarship. He's now down, I think, to one of the top 10 in the country, and I'm proud to say that 3 or 4 of those young men are out of the Big Ten, and he'll make that trip hopefully to New York if he's one of the last 6 picked. It's kind of like the Heisman Trophy of academics. But James has been solid all throughout his career. He's a political science major, so he's got a good head on his shoulders. And to your point about on the football field, I can remember as a true freshman, him forced into action in a Saturday night primetime national TV game against Penn State, and he made like 15 tackles. From the moment he entered the game, he was all over the field. He's gotten a lot bigger. He's gotten a lot stronger. He's gotten a lot smarter since that first game his freshman year. And he would be the first to tell you, Mike, that he's as good as he is because the 2 guys flanking him are both seniors as well. You know as well as I do that at this level of college football, it's a rarity when you have all 3 guys at that 4-3 the linebacker position grow up together and stay in school. And in Christian Kirksey, Anthony Hitchens, and James Morris, Iowa has 3 of the top 11 tacklers in the Big Ten. They all seem to be on the same page, and that's helped that young defensive line get stronger in front of them.
And this is a big, strong, physical defensive line, too, isn't it?
It is. They've got some deficiencies there. Let's start with inexperience. They've got a young tackle named Carl Davis who has been hurt most of his career. I believe he's a redshirt sophomore, but he has really started to mature now. I know Darrell Hazel at Purdue was talking a couple weeks ago about when they were getting ready for Iowa, how Big 71 jumped off the page at him. He's a kid out of Detroit, and finally healthy. He's had knee issues. He's had shoulder problems. And that's not good for a down lineman. They're missing Dominic Elvis, their outstanding defensive end. He's missed the last 2 or 3 games with a bad back, but they've got a couple young guys who've been able to plug in there and play okay. Mike Hardy is a 6'6" kid out of Wisconsin who's really come on the last couple games. On the other side, they have a young sophomore there in Drew Ott, a kid out of Nebraska. His dad played at Nebraska. Drew has really come on, and I guess they should in November. Now they've got 10 games under their belt. And then they have a little guy, an undersized guy, about 285, named Louis Trinka-Passat out of Chicago. He is just he reminds you of the Tasmanian Devil. He's got the beard. He's not very big, but he's. If you'll remember Mitch King and Carl Klug from a couple years ago. I'm not saying he's Mitch King or Carl Klug, but he is very, very close. He's tough to block because he's so quick off the block. So with the help of those linebackers, that front four has gotten better the last couple of weeks. I would agree with you.
Well, Saturday, Michigan rolls into to Kinnick Stadium, Gary, and despite that win against Northwestern on Saturday, we who follow Michigan know this is a team that has struggled each and every week outside of the Notre Dame game. Not so much on defense, but definitely on offense. On paper, I would think the Iowa staff and the fans have to feel pretty good about how they match up with this Michigan team. Wouldn't you think so?
I would agree with that, except, I'm around Kirk Ferentz a lot, and I try to be practical like him, which is impossible. But the bottom line is, when you play Michigan, you're waiting for that breakout game. And all I got to do is go back to last year up in Ann Arbor when Devin Gardner had a career day, and unfortunately that's the game Fitz Toussaint got hurt in. And ended up missing the rest of the year. Now he's just not back to where he was. You can see that. I watched that entire Northwestern game Saturday, and I'm still shaking my head, Mike, as to why this offense continues to bog down when you got guys on the outside that can catch the ball. You got a kid like Gardner. You still have outstanding running backs beyond Toussaint. I know there's been some injury problems, some issues with the offensive line, and that will bog down any offense. So Iowa's not being smokescreened into anything with Michigan perceived and obvious lack of offense or offensive production the last few weeks. This is a team that is extremely capable, and I think that's what Kirk Ferentz will drill into his guys this week. Yeah, Iowa's got a very good defense, but so does Michigan. So that said, Iowa's offense has been fairly productive, fairly consistent, and obviously comes off a momentum builder at West Lafayette, but I think Kirk has all the respect in the world. Well, I know he does have all the respect in the world for Greg Madison, the defensive coordinator, because his son played at Iowa, Brian Madison, and Kirk and Greg go way back. So I don't think there's going to be any surprises on Saturday at Kinnick Stadium. As you know, it's a great atmosphere to play college football in. And it's going to be the tougher team that wins the game. I have no doubt. It's going to be about 30 degrees. The wind's going to be howling. So whoever wants it the most and whoever gets that ground game going the first, I think has a decided advantage.
Right now, what do you think the keys are? Is that going to be it? The team that can get the running game going, maybe because of the weather conditions, that's going to be the key?
Yeah, the only thing I would put in front of that is turnovers. Iowa is undefeated when they win the turnover battle. They are 0-4 when they lose the turnover battle. I think back to Wisconsin, Northern Illinois. Michigan State was a 2-score game most of the second half, but Ohio State, Wisconsin, Northern Illinois were 1-score games deep into the fourth quarter. Wisconsin and Northern Illinois are right down at the end of the game. Ohio State just made some big plays, but they got a big interception on Rudock late in that game out in Columbus. So Iowa has literally lost those games on turnovers when they had a chance to win. I think the turnover differential will be huge on Saturday because it's going to be cold. The wind's going to be howling. It'll do different things to the football when you throw it. So I think both teams want to get that ground game going. We know Michigan's capable. Iowa's had the ground game going the last couple of games, even in defeat. and hopefully that will continue on Saturday. I think it'll be a terrific football game, and I think it'll be a close game.
As Michigan fans, we all know it seems like every time we make a trip to Kinnick Stadium for decades, it is just an incredibly tough venue to play in, great atmosphere. I remember our legendary radio play-by-play voice, Bob Ufer, one time, it was the late 70s, one of the games, and he said, God, I love this place. It was so loud there, but he said, God, I love this place. They designed a stadium, and they left a little room for the field. It is just a tough place to play.
That is about as good a description as I've heard, and here's why. For whatever reason, back in 1929, when they built Kinnick Stadium, they decided not to put a track, a 6 to 8 lane track, around the football field like most old stadiums did, because all that did was push that first row of fans back another 30, 35 feet. Well, at Kinnick Stadium, there is no track. The first row of the fans are literally on top of both sidelines. Therefore, if you're the visiting team, it's not very pleasant. I remember Norm Parker, before he came to Iowa, had one of the great lines that I've ever heard a coach utter. And when Norm was the defensive coordinator under George Perlis at Michigan State, when they would come to Kinnick Stadium, he said, I heard some new words, new vocabulary. He said, and I turned around and I saw 700 or 800 drunk farmers in deer hunting outfits. And apparently it was almost deer and pheasant hunting season, because usually we played them in November. That's one of the great lines. And of course, Norm Parker ends up coaching 15 years in Iowa City, so he loved it when the fans got rowdy. I'm not saying they're that bad, but I will say this: Iowa fans are very knowledgeable. They're very respectful of a great tradition-rich program like Michigan when it comes to Kinnick Stadium, and so therefore, cold or not, the atmosphere will be electric. And as you know, the bottom line is there's still plenty to play for both teams. Michigan's got 7 wins. Iowa has 6 wins. No, they're not probably going to go to a BCS bowl, but there's plenty to play for in terms of improving your bowl resume. And if I know Brady Hoke, and I think I know him pretty well, he's going to have his guys jacked up coming off that Northwestern win. A win's a win. The weather conditions were extremely tough on Saturday. The bottom line is, when you go on the road in this league, there's nothing guaranteed to you. And to come away with a victory, it proves that Michigan still has a lot of toughness, a lot of courage left in it for these remaining 2 games. And I've already heard this from Iowa fans, that Michigan no doubt will be looking past Iowa toward Ohio State next week. I've been around this game too long to know coaches like Brady Hoke and Greg Madison. They won't be looking past 11:01 on Saturday morning. Our guest on the show today on our visitor segment has been the radio play-by-play voice of the Iowa Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin. Gary, it's been a pleasure. Look forward to the next time. Thank you, Mike. Good to be on with you. On deck is Michigan beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive on our Michigan Game Day segment here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. Back with us on Michigan Game Day, Michigan beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. Good to have you back with us, Nick.
Good to be here, Mike.
Well, let's start off, Nick, talking about that thrilling 3-overtime victory against Northwestern on Saturday. Finally good to see some positive results in the rushing game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was different in that, the running backs were different, I guess. The offensive line, I think, had a little bit of a better day. I still don't think it was great, given all the sacks and negative plays they allowed. But, Fitztoussaint, according to Brady Hoke, had a concussion issue early last week, missed what I guess was probably the first half of the week of practice, and they didn't think he was ready to go, so they went with the freshman. They went with Derek Green to start the game and Davion Smith to be his primary back up, and those guys did something that Michigan hasn't been able to do all year, which was, take the ball on first down and not consistently set up Michigan in 2nd and 15, basically, and that you're looking at 2nd and 6 and whatever. I think you're able to have more manageable situations. You're able to have more of a presence physically. It didn't really. It should have worked better in regulation had they not shot themselves in the foot so many different times. But I think it allowed them to, sustain drives and not just go 3 and out, lose 10 yards and punt, which was what they were doing the last 2 weeks. So, some new blood in there, and 2 guys that really, if we're being honest, if you want to run what Al Borges wants to run, those are the 2 guys that fit the system the best. And a little surprising it didn't go that way before, and I'd actually be surprised if it doesn't continue to go that way with those 2 guys. But promising nonetheless, and something positive I think for the offensive line to look at, which is always good because they haven't had much of it lately.
Nick, Michigan came out pounding the running game in the first quarter consistently. I think we were all pleased to see that and get those positive results we've just talked about. And then they seemed to, abandon it pretty much for the most part until overtime. What do you think was going on with that? And did you get a chance to, talk to Al Borges after the game and ask him why the change in philosophy?
No, we talked to him on Tuesdays. We don't talk to him after games, but I looked at it again. I watched the tape again, and obviously we'll ask him on Tuesday. But I think that maybe sometimes I think they try to get a little bit too smart for their own good, if that makes sense. There was wind. Some pretty nasty wind there that day, and in the first quarter they were going into the wind, so it was 20-mile-an-hour wind. It was pretty significant. So the first quarter they're going into the wind. I think they wanted to run the football, and they did, and they stuck to that and didn't really do much via the passing game in that quarter because I pretty much felt they probably couldn't because the wind was so bad. Then they flipped the field the second quarter. They go with the wind at their back. I think they wanted to try something through the air, which is fine. And then it's not working, but the problem there is they never went away from it. They continued to do that. I think Derek Green had 1 carry in the second quarter. I don't think Davion Smith had any. And after what they both did in the first quarter, that makes absolutely no sense to me at all. Why are you going away from, I know that was probably a scripted deal and probably what you would plan going in, but, at some point you have to adjust during a game. And, that's what Greg Madison's done a great job of over his, time at Michigan. And that's part of the reason why the defense continues to be, even with its struggles, a pretty good statistically ranked defense, even with the problems they've had. They don't give up a lot of touchdowns. They don't give up a lot of stuff late because they make adjustments to what other teams are doing, and they do that on the fly, and they're fine. Borges makes them too, but he almost makes them too late half the time. And, he made adjustments in overtime on Saturday. And to me, going away from that in the second quarter, when maybe you had some momentum on your side, or you could have, just made no sense. And they went back to it later in the game, and it proved beneficial to them. But too many hiccups and too much complicated stuff. Just do it. The offense is struggling. You got to do it what works. And they didn't do it in the second quarter and lost all momentum, and were fortunate to go into halftime only down a field goal.
Well, Nick Baumgardner struggled much of the game. Could have had at least 5 picks easily in that game. Yeah. Decision-making was just, he struggled, just flat-out struggled. But he was a man in overtime, wasn't he?
He was. He, like you say, he keeps getting just battered every time they try to move the pocket, which was something I think last time I was with you a couple months ago or a month ago, whatever it was. I think we said, hey, this team needs to get Gardner in space. They need to move the pocket and do this, that, and the other. Well, now every time they do it, nobody blocks anybody because all they're getting is just blitz after blitz after blitz right up the middle. And he just physically isn't what he was in September or even October to escape out of there every time. And so, I think, he was struggling with the physical fatigue. I think some mental fatigue has crept in there. I think he plays a little timid sometimes, a little nervous, afraid to make a mistake. And then in overtime, I think some of that goes away, and he just says, I got to go win the football game. And, they take some chances in the end zone. He throws the touchdown pass to Jake Butt. They're moving the football without too much trouble. And then, when they get down to the goal line, the real, if anyone still wants to question whether or not Devin Gardner is a tough quarterback, all they need to do is watch that entire game and then look at the end when they get the ball down to the 5. He runs it in through 3 defenders, and then on the 2-point conversion, he runs it in again, by himself. I mean, he has just taken so many hits, and not like running back hits, but just, awkward whatever. Every time he drops back, he's getting hit, and he just keeps going. And it's not the perfect year for him. It's not been as bad a year as some people want to say it's been. But whatever it has been, he's always been able to get back up and keep going, and that's admirable no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, he's a tough kid. I think at least everyone has to give him that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nick, the field goal with no timeout, clock running, have you ever seen it executed more perfectly or maybe even lucky?
No. I don't know if I've ever seen it executed at all. To be honest, I was thinking about that after a game, and I'm trying to think. I've seen teams try it, and it's failed. And I've seen teams try with like 30 seconds to go, and they've gotten it off. But never in that short of a time where, they run out the fast field goal. And I remember thinking when they were doing it, I was like, what are they doing? I don't, I would have just gotten up and thrown the ball to the end zone. I don't know. I mean, it was a bold decision, and one obviously that they thought about before, 4 or 5 plays ahead of time, and they were ready to go. I mean, they executed it perfectly. Some of it was with luck, but some of it was just pure execution. They practiced that, a couple times a week. The way the field goal team ran onto the field kind of already in their positions and got right to where they needed to be was just kind of astounding. I mean, for a team that's had so many focus problems and so many little issues with, I can remember games where they didn't have enough guys in the huddle on field goals. And for them to have all these little, problems throughout the year and to just pull that off perfectly was, maybe it's a sign of their growing up. I don't know. Or maybe it's a sign of just being lucky at the right time because, there were so many things that had to go into that needed to work in their favor. One of which being the fact that Brendan Gibbons is left-footed because, Drew Gillio, the holder, is running a vertical pattern on the bottom of the field on the, the far left side by the Northwestern sideline. He has to run all the way back across and, he makes the slide down to get in position right in time. If he had to run across Gibbons' body, if Gibbons is a right-footed kicker, and then readjust himself to get the hold, the play would have been dead. There would have been no way they could have gotten it off. And, and if the ball goes to anybody but Jeremy Gallen right there near the sideline, there's no way they got it off. I mean, if they had to run to the other hash, they wouldn't have made it. So many random things had to happen, but they did. And it was a fortunate, couple of events that set it up for them. They obviously executed it, and Gibbons obviously made a great kick with, no time to think about it. So, they needed a break, I think, something to work out for them, and they took advantage of it. They've had breaks in the past. We saw against Nebraska, they didn't take advantage of them. Michigan State, they even had some breaks, never took advantage of them. So, they needed one badly, and they needed to not only get one, but they needed to make it count, and they absolutely did. It was just one of those plays that you'll be hard-pressed to see a situation like that again and watch football for a long time. That was pretty incredible.
Yeah, another thing, I was watching WGN, getting their perspective after the game, and it all happened so fast. It was like a fire drill in those closing seconds. But the one thing I didn't pay attention to, we all focused on, look how Michigan got out there and got set up.
Mm-hmm.
They were pointing out in WGN, and when I watched it over and over, the Northwestern defense was standing around. You had some of the linebackers walking around. It was almost as if they were thinking, what are they doing? They're never going to get this off. So they were very much out of position, too.
Yeah, and I think Pat Fitzgerald was a little miffed in that I didn't quite get this. I think he was upset at the time that he thought that the defense should have had a chance to substitute. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't know maybe I don't know football well enough, but that doesn't make any sense to me. I have no idea why a field goal team needs to give the defense time to substitute its player. That doesn't make any sense. And so he was upset that they didn't have a chance to get their field goal block team out there, or whatever, but more or less I think he was upset because just the play worked. How could that actually happen? But Northwestern, I mean, that he didn't harp on that too much to his credit because he knows his team, like you say, Mike, they dropped 5 interceptions. They could have put that thing away so many different times and they couldn't get it done. And Northwestern's pretty snake bitten. And for that one to go through, I can't imagine what that was like in that locker room. But just, terrible break for them and a great one for Michigan. And, Michigan loves to talk about it.
Well, Nick, with the offense struggling through most of the game, the defense I thought was, again, pretty darned good. We have those issues in the secondary. Mm-hmm. We didn't see so much of that on Saturday. But, overall, when you look at it now, heading into this week against Iowa, Greg Madison overall has this defense getting better each week, doesn't he?
Yep. I think outside of the Indiana game, and so I had a couple moments against Penn State, and I wouldn't even say that because I think the defense actually, other than that one bad last drive, I think the defense played really well considering the situations they were put in at Penn State. I would say outside of the Indiana game, that defense has improved every week. Something's gotten better every week. And I think anyone who's watched Michigan over the last 2 years with Craig Madison knew that was probably coming. Whether you wanted to admit it or not, if you're frustrated, whatever, if you stopped and thought about it for a second, his defense is always find a way to play as well as they can, at some point in the middle of November toward the end of November, and they're doing that right now. They're playing a lot of young guys, and some of them are starting to get it. Notably, James Ross, who I think he had 13 tackles and a sack, and I thought he played very well against Nebraska, last week as well. So, I think James Ross is coming into his own a little bit here. I think part of that is the defensive line is starting to not necessarily create a dominant pass rush, but they're, the guys like Willie Henry, some of the younger guys that are coming in, Chris Wormley, these guys are taking on blockers and are making it difficult for guys to get down on linebackers, and that allows, Morgan and James Ross and even Jake Ryan, who's in there now, to move around and make plays, and especially get up to the line of scrimmage and really stuff any kind of run attack, because Michigan's run defense has been outstanding this year. Outside of, the end of the game against Michigan State, and then at moments against Nebraska, who has the best running back in the Big Ten and one of the best in the country, they have been very, very good. I think they're still top 10 defensively in rush yards, top 15. So it takes a lot to run the football on this team, and that's one thing that they can hang their hat on and say that's been consistent all season. And all these young guys are getting time. I mean, Taco Charlton's playing a lot more now. He's playing inside and out. Chris Wormley's playing a lot. James Stribling and Jordan Lewis are playing a lot. DeMonte Thomas has played some over the last couple of weeks. They're doing what they've done in the past, where they've rolled with the veterans early and they've wrinkled those freshmen in, and later in the year those guys are, being forced to be put in situations where they have to learn. And it's nothing but, the defense and the way they've built it here, that's what Brady Hoke wants to do, and that's what they want to hang their hat on. And I think that, moving forward into next season, if you look at what they have back as opposed to what they lose, they should be pretty excited about how the defense, could shape up to be, a pretty special unit going forward in 2014.
I think so. There are a lot of positives to take when it comes to the defense. Each week we look for positives coming out of a game, which has really been tough this year. Saturday was ugly at times, but most importantly, it was a win. And, we can pick this team's faults apart. We've done it all year. But I think at this point we have to say they're tougher than a lot of people think they are, and they do not quit.
Yeah, no, they're tough. I mean, as far as standing in there and just not going anywhere, and hanging in and doing everything they can to try and win a football game. That part of it, yeah, that part of it you can't question. I think what a lot of people say what a lot of people want to call Michigan soft, it comes from they don't block anybody and they haven't been able to assert themselves on the ground in the on offense, and that's fair, and you can't really ignore that. And I went a couple weeks ago, and I wouldn't call them soft. I think it was after the Michigan State game even, where they got thoroughly just manhandled. But I just thought they continued to compete the entire game, and I wrote something about they're not soft. I wouldn't go that far. They're weak in a lot of areas, but softness is not one of them. A soft football team would have folded that puppy up in the second quarter and been done on Saturday. I mean, it would have been over. I've covered teams like that. I've been around teams like that. And in those moments, after you lose a game against Michigan State and you lose a game against Nebraska like that, the way they did, and then you still have the same struggles in the first half against Northwestern. I've covered so many teams in the past that have just quit, and nobody's blamed them. It's not going your way. So why? You have plenty of reasons to fold up and go away, and you did. Nobody blames you. But this team they just won't go away, and that's ultimately that's the Brady Hoke effect, I guess. The number one thing in its truest form is that no matter how long he coaches here, no matter what happens, none of us have any idea. But I can say without too much hesitation that regardless of what kind of team he has, those teams are never going to give up. I have a really hard time believing he'd ever lose a locker room or ever lose the effort of his kids, just because it just hasn't happened. It hasn't even come close to happening in any game, in any situation, win or lose, good or bad. And that's a pretty good thing to have. I mean, they have a lot of work to do in a lot of areas, and they got to get a lot better in a lot of spots. But as far as heart goes, and as far as just fighting, toughness and just staying in there and staying in the game and playing for each other when they had every reason not to, that's pretty impressive. And that's something to take away from that game, if nothing else, that, these guys play for each other, they play for a team, and he's gotten them to understand that. And, I think people that, maybe watched this football team before Brady Hoke got here, maybe can appreciate that, because that wasn't always the case.
Our guest here with us this week on Michigan Gameday is Michigan beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. Nick, this Saturday it's on to Kinnick Stadium, Iowa. Their 4 losses this season have been to teams ranked in the AP Top 25. Most importantly, I think for them, though, is they are playing their best football of the season right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're a very steady group. I'm surprised. I was surprised at Iowa this year, given how terrible they were last year, especially as the year went on. They kind of just got worse and worse and worse. But no, their defense has been great. All season they found their formula that they need to win football games, and they've done it. And that's, they're other than Michigan State, that's the second best defense in the league. They're not comparable to Michigan State because I don't think anyone really is. But if Michigan State wasn't in the Big Ten, they'd be the best defense in the Big Ten. So and then the other part of it too is when Michigan goes to Kinnick, it's a problem for them, and they get one win since 2001 or something like that. It's just been, if you make mistakes up there or over there, whatever you want to call it geographically, if you make mistakes in Kinnick, typically Iowa's going to take advantage of it, and you're not going to be able to overcome that. So, Iowa physically is a bad matchup for Michigan because they're going to, if they have any kind of success or if they have any kind of confidence with that running game from last week, it's going to have to double because Iowa's so much better against the run than Northwestern even hopes to be. And, you're going to have to find a way to do something offensively and then not turn the football over again. You can't do that on the road. Obviously, they didn't do it last week, and that was a big plus for them, even though they came close 5-6 times. But, Iowa isn't going to flash you, isn't going to overwhelm you. If they can win the football game 16-10, they'll do it. I think they've already won a couple of scores close to that. They want to run the football and kind of control the clock and, keep your defense on the field as long as it can. So as long as Michigan's defense gives itself a chance and the offense can find something to do, the game's winnable. But you can't make a lot of mistakes. This has got to be a pretty mistake-free game, and you can't just give Iowa points because then you really don't have much of a chance.
No, absolutely not. And looking at that Iowa defense, they're young, they're physical up front. Mm-hmm. The linebacking core outstanding, led by James Morris, who's having just a great season. Would you expect with this defense, this seems to be the kind of defense that just is going to give Michigan fits. I would expect they're just going to load it up in the box, especially with what is supposed to be sort of a crazy weather day, and ask or let Devin Gardner try to beat them.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, like you said, Mike, this is not a good matchup for Michigan's offensive line because they're very capable, they're very athletic, they do what they need to do, and I think they're going to load it up. I think they're going to, heat it up the middle, just like Northwestern, Nebraska, and Michigan State did. Try to get in the backfield, rattle up Devin Gardner, and take away any kind of ground game that Michigan has outside of him. And if you do that, then what are they going to do? I mean, if the weather's bad and they have to take shots, then they're pressing and then they're doing other things. So, Michigan's offensive line has to find a way to have some sort of push, and they have to hit whoever the running back is. Has to be able to at least, if there's a crack there, they have to get in there and they have to move a pile 2 or 3 yards to just kind of churn things along. You cannot sit there and be in 2nd and 12 or 3rd and 14 or whatever it is and hope to win the game. You can't have those situations. They avoided those for the most part against Northwestern, and that's what kept them sort of in the game. They have to stay on schedule against Iowa, or you're just feeding into a nightmare because their defense is too good, and eventually they'll probably create turnovers that other teams, Northwestern and Nebraska, never really did. So you can't let them wreak havoc on you. You got to be firm and strong and establish yourself. And if you don't do that, it's gonna be a long day.
And then on the other side of the ball, we've talked about how well Michigan's defense is playing, how statistically good they are. The Iowa offense, when you look at them, I've seen quite a bit of them this year. They don't do anything that you would consider high-tech or sexy.
No.
Power running game, very safe passing game. And young Jake Rudock, their quarterback, he makes very good decisions. Watching quite a bit of him this year, I'm impressed. They don't try to get him to do too much. He stays within the offense, makes pretty good decisions. But still, I think Michigan's defense matches up really well against this kind of an offense.
Yeah, I think that Iowa in general is sort of a poor man's Michigan State in a way, in that, they're less, defensively they want to win the game with their defense, but then, like I say, on offense, they're not going to take too many chances. They're not going to do anything crazy. They're not as athletic as Michigan State is offensively, and they're not as good. But, if you allow them to kind of control the game a little bit on the ground with Weissman or some of those other guys, then they're going to keep the clock, and they're going to just play field position football on you and win the football game. But the other thing that plays into that is if your defense is ready to go, you can get off the field because they don't have a whole lot of playmakers. They don't have a whole lot of guys that can do a bunch of stuff that, flips the field or breaks containment. They don't have an athletic quarterback or dynamic guy. They don't have a dynamic running back. They have guys that are just north and south and want to move the football. So there's two things with that. If you can limit them, you can hang in and kind of hold serve with their defense, or if you somehow get a lead early in the game and make them have to play catch up, then it's a whole different ballgame. It's the same situation as it was against Michigan State, in my opinion. That I said going into that game, if Michigan could have gotten a lead early in that Michigan State game, everything would have changed. Everything would have changed because pressure would have been on their offense. They would have had to perform and not just, play with this kind of loose feeling that our defense will pick us up and we'll be fine. Or you hold serve as long as you can and hope somebody makes a mistake. And, against Michigan State, that's what Michigan did for a long time. And eventually Michigan was the one that made the mistake on offense and never could overcome it. So that's how I think this game's going to kind of go. I think the defense is going to have to keep them in it, and the offense is going to have to find a way to kind of reward them for those efforts.
With the way the season has gone, Nick, 2 wins, however you get them on the road, would be a huge psychological boost for this young team heading into that Ohio State game, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. This Iowa game was one that I kind of circled before or after the Michigan State game and thought, if they could somehow go into that with, whatever it is, 7-3, 8-2, whatever it might be, and then find a way to win this game before that Ohio State game, that would be just monumental for this team because they haven't played well on the road in real tough environments. They beat Northwestern, obviously, but that's not, Northwestern. There was more Michigan fans there than there were Northwestern fans, or at least half and half. So to go to Iowa, a place where you've struggled, for all these years, and find a way to win a football game, that would be just, that could be a massive turning point for them this season, or maybe even as a team in general, just to prove to themselves that they can go win a tough football game like that. And then, there you are. If you win this game, you're at 8-3, and you're feeling about as good about yourself as you have all season going into the biggest game of the season. So you couldn't ask for anything more than that. Give yourself a chance, and it's just a big game. It's a very big test and a very big, where are we really at if you're Michigan? And this is a big one for them, and it's one they have to have. If you lose this one, you lose your confidence again, I think, and beating Ohio State would be even more difficult than it already probably will be. So, just a big physical test and big mental test for Michigan this week at Iowa.
Well, Nick, we've all watched this Michigan team all year very closely. We put them under a microscope, so we have our opinion on, the season and what we expect. But it's always interesting to me to get someone else's opinion. And earlier today I talked to Gary Dolphin, who's the fine radio play-by-play guy for Iowa, and he told me something interesting. He said he's watched a lot of Michigan game film this year. He had a chance, because Iowa had the bye week last weekend, to watch the Northwestern game. And he said, something I found interesting, he said that when he looks at this Michigan offense and the talent that's out there in the field, he said he just wonders, when is this team going to explode?
Yeah.
And, I don't see that happening having watched them all year. But do you get the feeling that this offense still has that in them?
Yeah, I think they absolutely do. I mean, they have the best, they have the best 1-2 receiver combination in the league, and I don't think it's really that close in Gallon and Funchess. They have a very athletic coming along tight end in Jake Butt, and they have 2 young running backs they finally started to use that are really good football players. And Devin Gardner, if you keep him upright, is really, really good. So it all comes down to, at some point, is the light going to go off, or is the switch going to flip, or something with the 3 guys in the middle of the offensive line? If that happens, they can score points on anybody, anywhere, anytime. I mean, they just can. That's just, I mean, you saw it against Notre Dame. They, lit the field up because they were holding serve in the middle and everything else was fine. If you're gonna say our offensive line is at least gonna just be average and stalemate your defensive line, then we'll take if you're Michigan, you'll take your skill spots against theirs on defense pretty much every time, except for probably Michigan State. And even then, that might be a wash in some areas. But they have all the tools and possibilities and capabilities to do this. It's just those three guys in the middle have got to be better. And if they can be, then yeah, I mean, you could run into a situation where, if it's all clicks, they could have a huge day. And I think that's still a carrot they're trying to hold out there for some of those guys. And, they're just, I know the interior of that line, they're trying to bring them along as much as they can. And they've gone through the battles here and seen how it goes the other way. We'll see if a little confidence maybe does something for them. I don't know. But they definitely have some positive film to look at, and that's important for them. But I think the potential is still there. I don't know if they'll get there, but I think the potential is still there for this offense to really do something against somebody. It just has to all come together. It can't be 9 guys. It's got to be all 11.
Nick, your early vibes about Saturday and the Iowa game, do you think Michigan is going to make it 2 in a row?
No, I don't think so. I think I can't, I don't think I can pick Michigan in this game just for everything we said. I think the matchups, I didn't pick Michigan last week either, so if that gives anyone comfort, I don't know, maybe that'll help. But the matchups are not good. It's a bad matchup with the way Iowa likes to play and as good as their defense is, especially against the run, that Michigan's offensive line is going to have to take a massive step forward. And if that doesn't happen, I just can't see a way they can overcome some of that stuff. So is it impossible? Absolutely not. I think they're going to have a chance. They're not going to get blown out, I don't think. I think they'll be in the football game and have a chance to win it. My gut would say right now, as we said, I would say Iowa probably wins the game. But it'll be interesting because it's a kind of it's a bar of, almost not quite a final exam, but really how far have you come? And are you really improving? And, we'll find that out on Saturday. Or are you the same team that just get lucky last week? And that's what this is kind of all about. So, it'll be interesting. I would probably pick Iowa, but, I wouldn't be stunned if Michigan was able to come in there and walk away with a win.
Well, it's going to be interesting. As usual, when you look ahead and try to scout this week's game with Iowa, it's just tough to get a read on this team. So I think as Gary Dolphin, Iowa's play-by-play guy, said, it probably with 30-degree temperatures, gusty winds, that's at least the advanced forecast right now. It's going to come down to who plays tougher and who doesn't make mistakes.
Yeah, who flinches. And that's, that was sort of the deal with Northwestern. It was it was a poorly played game in a lot of areas, but it was, who was going to flinch first and who was going to make that one massive mistake to kind of ruin the game. And, eventually, I guess we can say it was Northwestern. I mean, they couldn't close it out. They couldn't seal a deal. They let them hang around long enough. And if a similar situation presents itself, it's who's going to flinch first. And, the weather is going to be bad. I think it's a high of 28, so it's going to be cold. Your offensive line just has to play well enough to win a football game, and your running backs have to give you a chance. If that doesn't happen, it's going to be a long day. I think we know the formula for defeat for Michigan. I think we probably know the formula for success. It is what it is at this point, and you're just going to have to grind one out and prove that they can do it.
Well, amen to that. Our guest on the show this week has been Nick Baumgardner, Michigan beat writer from MLive. As always, Nick, it's been a pleasure, and we look forward to the next time.
All right, Mike, thank you.
Stick around next for Wolverine Quick Hits as we wrap it up for another week here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, according to Coach Hoke, Fitz-Toussaint sat out Saturday's game against Northwestern due to concussion-like symptoms. No word yet, at least, as to whether he'll be a go for this week against Iowa. Other than that, as Brady said, everyone is sore and banged up at this point of the season, but all in all, the team is in pretty good shape heading into this Saturday. Playing at Kinnick Stadium, as we've talked about, is never easy. The crowd is right on top of you, and it is very loud. It is one of the best environments in college football, though, a lot of fun. If the weatherman is on the mark, it could be an interesting day. Right now, the forecast is for gusty winds and a game time temp around 30 degrees. At least it's supposed to be dry. Kickoff is scheduled for 12 noon. Don't forget our show app is now available from a variety of sources. For Android users, we're in the Market Store at Amazon.com. For Apple devices, our app is available in the iTunes Store. Another great way to tune us in for free is with the TuneIn Radio app. You can also hear the show on Stitcher Radio on demand. Download the free app today at www.stitcher.com. Our phone lines are open for your calls 24/7, and we would love to hear from you. Give us your thoughts on the Northwestern game, the Iowa game, the game with Ohio State, which is right around the corner. You can also email your thoughts and opinions to us at the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. And our listener line, by the way, is 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. So please give us a shout. I would love to hear from you. And a reminder to like our Facebook page at the Michigan Man Podcast and follow us on Twitter at the Michigan Man. If you get the show from iTunes, please take a minute to rate or review the show. Your feedback is important. Next week, we get ready for the game. It's Michigan-Ohio State week. If we can pull out a win at Iowa Saturday, however we get it done, it could be just what we need to get us ready for a visit from the number 4 Buckeyes. And how sweet it would be to knock them off in the Big House next week. It seems like a long shot right now, but I think what happens this week against Iowa will go a long way in helping this young team be in a we can do it frame of mind for next week. Either way, it's the game, and Michigan will be ready, rest assured. So I hope you'll join us next week as we preview and get ready for the Michigan-Ohio State game. Until then, I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone, and stay positive. Just like last week, I have good and positive vibes about our trip to Iowa this week. Let's get a win and come back ready to finish the season on a high note. And I think like most of you, I can't wait for next weekend. So thanks for listening, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue.